Hello, hello. Welcome back to another episode of Minds on Mushrooms. I'm your host, Maggie Kirkwood. Thank you so much for tuning in today, you guys. I'm sitting here with Deborah Kadagian, who is an integrative psychotherapist, artist, and author of The Alchemy of Grief, Conversations in Paint. This is a book she just released in February, and it's deeply personal. It's a reflection on her journey through grief after losing her son, Sean. So in her book, Deborah weaves together art, journal entries, and her experience with plant medicine to explore how creativity and psychedelics become tools for healing, transformation, and integration. Thank you so much, Debbie, for joining today. I am so honored to have you here. I received your book earlier this week, and not only is your artwork just so profound, I really just want to kind of dive in, and I just would love to start with your story, not just of loss, but how your background as a psychotherapist shaped the way you've been moving through grief. And of course, we want to hear everything. But anyway, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for joining.
Thanks for having me.
You are in the field of integrative psychotherapy. Let's start there.
Let's see. It was sort of a swivelly journey. I started off 25 years ago as a yoga teacher. And then I got very interested in Ayurveda because I did a Panchakarma retreat. And it had a similar impact on me as a psychedelic retreat. Because when I was home, I felt very different. I felt like parts of me had been moved away, and I was much more connected to my true emotions and things that I didn't really realize about myself. And so I ended up getting a certificate as an Ayurvedic practitioner. And I did that for a while. And then my husband and I created a film that integrated Western psychiatry with Ayurveda, but it was about the mind. And I had found that a lot of my Ayurvedic clients at the time were coming to me with things that had to do with their mind more so than their body. So we created this film. And at the time, I wanted to bring it into rehabs and help people who were coming out of a 30-day rehab create a new lifestyle, because Ayurveda is the science of life, and it's about learning what your own personal constitution is, and rhythms of the day that work for you, foods that work for you. And so I would call rehabs. I lived near one in Connecticut, and I actually ended up interning there when I was a student for my master's. And I would get the same response over and over, which was, we already have a yoga teacher. And but this isn't yoga. This is a whole science and lifestyle that I would love to just come in and teach them. Long story short, I went and spoke to the dean of a school, a university nearby, and told her what I was interested in doing. And she said, "You need your license." And this was 2014, maybe 15. And I had no plans of going back to school at the time and getting a master's. And when she said that, I just thought, okay. And I enrolled in the school, and I got my master's, did some amazing internships. And that film went on it's on Gaia now, and it's been and it's doing really well. And I never did get in rehabs through that venue, but I ended up working at that particular psychiatric hospital for a while. And then we moved to Florida, and I've opened a private practice here. And my psychedelic integration work flooded in here because there's have you heard of MAPS?
Yes. Yep.
Yeah. So early on, I was listed with them as one of their integration therapists.
Okay.
And then apparently they closed their list. So it only had very few people on it. And for the state of Florida, I think it was me and one other person. So
Okay.
anybody who was looking for psychedelic integration and was going through their list, I was just flooded with calls. And that was maybe, what are we in, 2025? Maybe like 2018.
Okay. So you are getting flooded with calls from people who've experienced
Yes.
a psychedelic, I guess, breakthrough or experience and just need help
Yes.
with integration, which is the word we hear constantly. And I'm really trying to press as well. I think we can easily toss out the word integration, but I'd like to kind of like just dig deeper on, what exactly to you does integration mean? And as it involves psychotherapy, can we kind of talk about that?
Yeah. So really, it's just making sense of their experience. So some people were coming already having had an experience, or some people wanted to have one, but were nervous and didn't know what to expect. So there was some people were in that preparation phase, because there's definitely a way to go into a psychedelic experience, a proper set in your mind and the setting that they're going to.
Absolutely.
So integration is basically coming in, talking about the experience, trying to understand what the message was, what the gift was even something that's very difficult, always has gems in there that are trying to speak to your soul and let you see the fears you might have, or if you had a beautiful love experience and that isn't really what your waking life is like. It's trying to show you that that's what exists. So it's always different for everybody.
I love how you use the word gift. That's such a nice way of putting it, because some of these gifts that we receive may not feel that way at the time.
Right.
But isn't it kind of about transmuting or acknowledging what's coming? And the gift is transmuting that energy or that memory or that pain. I don't know. I just, so I love you using that word. Yeah. And I guess keep going. And I'd also like you to chime in on how this is different from like traditional talk therapy too.
Yeah. For me, the type of therapy I do has always been very intuitive. Like I'm not necessarily CBT or DBT, or it's just kind of all in there. When somebody walks in, it's like, and I think that comes with my age, because I am one of the older type of therapists, and I think you just sort of bring a whole lot of life experience in when
Absolutely.
door. And so that doesn't mean that a difficult experience isn't difficult, but it is trying to extract what was it trying to show you. And if the person goes somewhere where there's some really experienced guides, that can actually be transmuted, as the word you used, it within the experience as it's happening, as it's unfolding. But a lot of times people have these great experiences, and then they come back home into their regular life. And for the first 2 weeks, it's all just great, and people want to share it with everyone. And, oh, you got to do this. This is the greatest thing. And then the neuroplasticity of the brain is open at the time after many plant medicine experiences, which is why you come back kind of, with this beautiful feeling. Even if you have a difficult experience, sometimes you still come back with a really changed brain. But if we don't start instilling some disciplines and some new neural pathways in the brain during that period when it's kind of neuroplastic, it will tend to go back to where it was before the experience, because the brain likes what it's familiar with, and these neural pathways like what they're familiar with, which is why I think a lot of people stay in a world of suffering, because it's what the brain is used to. And the brain does really like what it's used to, what it's familiar with. So you really do have to work hard to change that. And it's one of the reasons why a plant medicine experience can open that window for you.
So I think on the podcast, we've talked about this window, or I like to call it like the critical learning period. And so true. I mean, I think with psychedelic experiences, I'm always constantly talking about, where you have to visit the dark to see the light, but there are challenging trips, meaning cathartic releases can happen, or, and I think it's all about perception for me. That is a release, and it's something I'm releasing and not taking home with me. But I do feel when you have some of these very powerful, positive, you're seeing things that you've never even really dreamed of. I'd like to talk about, we hear integration a lot for challenging experiences, but embodying some of these amazing supernatural insights that are gifted. Any tips? Is it more about conversation and sharing your experience? And ultimately, I do want to kind of segue this into obviously your book and art. This happened with me actually recently. I was in a massive ceremony, 40 plus people. We had 2 actually. And my first night was about 5 hours of just sobbing and crying. But for each tear shed, it was light pumping me up and recognizing or telling me, Maggie, you're so strong. Maggie, you're here to inspire others. So it was like this, cancellation. I don't even know how to put it, or this transmutation maybe. And then the second journey was, I didn't have any tears left to shed. And it was just things happening that I can't even put into words. And, just feeling like I'm on cloud 9 for weeks. And I was thankful, and I don't want to make this all about me, but I was thankful to incorporate a lot of meditation, but microdosing to kind of keep this, what do we call it? After you come out of an experience, you're kind of in this
you
state.
That thread, right?
Yes. And for the first time, I think with the microdosing and just dedication to meditation every day, I allowed myself to just kind of revisit some of these amazing moments without shoving them out. That didn't happen, or that, and I think for me, it's just being able to talk about it and not feel like, oh, well, I was just high, or, so again, it's all about continuing this conversation, but I'm so thrilled to have you here with your professional background, like literally as an integrative psychotherapist. So I'd love to hear any perspective you have on any of that.
Well, you just nailed it, because one of my favorite things that I do in my practice is I have an integration group. And this one is a really tight-knit group where it's the same people every week. And so they've really gotten to know each other. And we've been running this particular group for, I think, almost 2 years, it feels like. And it's become this place where, like you just said, the more you keep talking about something and sharing something. One of my favorite quotes is, a joy shared is a joy doubled, and a sorrow shared is a sorrow halved. And there's sorrows that get shared and joys that get shared. And if somebody had a recent experience, they come in and everybody's, super excited to hear, and then they want to ask questions. And I'm almost sitting back, just allowing this community to help each other and listen to each other. And then at some point during the group, I'll do a reading that, is really pertinent to what we're talking about, and then ask people how that hit them. Mm-hmm. And everybody is listening to each other. And I think it's one of the best ways to keep something going and feel like, these people call each other outside the group, and, it's just become, I actually listened to one of your podcasts with I say older gentleman, but I think I'm older than him. And he talked about the community, and that is so much of what people are missing. If you go on a retreat, you're in this like beautiful bubble, hopefully, of a community. And I just worked at one in Costa Rica, a retreat that was absolutely stellar, like the best retreat I've ever witnessed. And the community there was so beautiful. And 2 of my clients came with me. And I think afterwards, it was like this recognition of, you have that during a retreat, but it's really important to have that after a retreat. And so,
oh my God.
Yeah, like coming in one-on-one is also great, because that's a lot of what I do. But the integration groups are so good. And just like you were just sharing with me, solidifies it more in your neuro.
It really does. And you're probably one of 4 people I've shared. I think it's funny because I tend to share, to me, I look at it like it is so much work, right? I think it's the hardest but most important work that we can do. And I've been on a journey and constantly sharing a lot of the hardships that I've been through, just because I think that's what's shaped and formed the journey. Mm-hmm. But I think it's equally important to share some of these, enlightening, just amazing things, because it's the whole paradox. So anytime anybody's willing to talk about experience and stories, I'm here for it all day long. Storytelling is just fabulous. And I find it so inspiring, and you learn so much from everyone.
You do. You learn really so much, and you feel so much from everybody. Your heart gets bigger and bigger the more you're holding. I tend to shy away from therapy phrases, but the more you're holding space for people, the bigger it gets. And I've seen it happen with every single one of these members of this particular group. But I was going to say, when you were saying it's a lot of work, I think eventually it isn't a lot of work. In the beginning, when you said you had a lot of tears, it's a very cathartic release, and it does require a lot of energy in the body to release all that. But there will come a day, where that's not really happening for you anymore, and it's just sort of this equanimity of like, there's joy and there's sorrow, and you can kind of sit in this space of like feeling each one, but also witnessing each one, and I think that's where the choice of suffering stops, because I'm not identifying in there, and I can kind of say, oh, I can see that happens, and I can see that this happens, and I'm riding the wave of all of it while I'm kind of witnessing it at the same time. Do you know what I mean?
You just said that so eloquently, and you're speaking my language. I love to say riding the wave. Like, it's teaching me to surf, even though I don't surf, but I can pretend I do. And in my trips, maybe I am. So I'd love to talk. So you were practicing or are integrative psychotherapy. Can we kind of turn toward your son, Sean, and a little bit of the background there, and losing him, and how this kind of like pivots and shapes you and your work?
Yeah. So my son was a very spiritual seeker. He I think I mentioned in the book that my daughter and I flew to Peru when he was studying to be an apprentice shaman at an ayahuasca school. And we had this sort of spontaneous ayahuasca journey. We weren't necessarily planning on it at the time. We were doing these other Pachamama ceremonies and different things like that. And then my daughter and I just said we should give Sean this experience of, being under his guidance and tutelage. And he wasn't the main shaman. There's the Peruvian shamans from the Shipibo tradition. And anyway, so that was a really special experience to happen for myself, and I think for my daughter as well. And then, a year later, he left this plane, and the reason I ended up putting that book out, I had just sort of I was propelled into painting, and I had painted when I lived in Connecticut once a week with a really beautiful Russian teacher, but it was still lifes, and it was just a really lovely class. And, us Connecticut women were it was just not really, for me, a super creative thing. It was just a really nice thing. So I did have some background in painting, and I did love it. But then when I went back to school and started doing this work, I didn't have time to do that. And I hadn't picked up a paintbrush in probably 6 years. And anyway, so after he passed, I don't even have words for how I just found myself at an art store shoving these huge canvases in my car and buying paints and paintbrushes and getting home and just painting from like morning to night without even noticing how much time went by. And they were large canvases, which I had never really worked on before. But I think there was this kind of somatic experience that needed to happen for me, because I was moving my body all over the place, up and down and backing up and down. And I was just obsessed. And that actually is not my nature. I'm not an obsessive person, but I was truly obsessed. And for 4 years straight, I just painted. I would come to work on the days that I worked, and then I'd go home and back in front of the canvas. And on the days that I didn't work, I would be in my pajamas still, and at 3:00 in the afternoon, realize I didn't eat or I hadn't even changed. It was a really, that was sort of like the first year. Then I think I talked about in the book, it kind of softened after that. But I was painting straight for 4 years.
Do you feel like you were like releasing words and emotions that you like couldn't express verbally, like onto these canvases? It
was partly that, and it was partly I was in communion with my son.
Okay, yeah.
Completely. I was, he was with me. I had a very strong spiritual connection with him before, but in this scenario, he was in my head. He was coming out on the canvas. He was rallying me. I actually went on it was mushrooms, actually, a mushroom retreat, like maybe 5 months after. And I brought paints with me, and his voice was with me throughout the whole thing. And there were signs constantly throughout the whole retreat that he was just, there was a butterfly on my way walking to the ceremony space that landed on my hand, and it had like a Mayan Aztec design that looked like it was a butterfly from Peru.
Oh, wow. Oh my God.
It just stayed on my hand, and I'm like, hello. And I'm just staring at it, and it's staring at me. I took my glasses out of my pocket, and I'm like looking at this thing, and I'm looking at the wings. It would not leave my hand. And I said, well, I'm not going in the ceremony space until you leave, because I'm you. And it was just crazy. I heard his voice saying to me, this ceremony is for you. mom. This is for
Mm.
you to be more you. Like, you're always helping people, and this is for you to be you. And
Wow.
amazing.
I just love hearing all of those signs. And I think it's truly something that the more you allow yourself to believe that they can exist, the more they happen. And it's just such a probably ultimate feeling.
Yeah.
um,
And for me, it wasn't even a belief. It was just like, I know.
right.
Don't know how to
Yes.
explain it.
The
There,
certainty.
yeah, it was just a knowing. And yeah, so like 4 years into the painting, I started backing up a little bit and like just trying to make sense of, like, finally kind of slowing down a little bit and breathing and looking. I mean, I have so many paintings in my storage room
Wow.
because they were just one after the other, after the other, after the other. And so I just started backing up and sort of trying to make sense of the last 4 years in a way that was just like, okay, sort of after some of my clients have like spiritual emergencies, I'll call it. And
Okay.
as they're going through it, we're not sort of backing up and making sense of it. You're going through it,
Mm.
and then at some point when you feel like it's coming to an end and you're sort of not back, but kind of changed from it, but you're not in the midst of all of it, then you kind of start looking back and making sense of it.
Hmm.
So it was kind of similar to that. And then as I started like seeing this sort of sequence of how my paintings went from like words on them and some of his poems on them, and then they went from like kind of very structured geometric, and then they kind of got softer, and then I had done another retreat that sparked a whole nother set of paintings. As I was trying to like make sense of it, and I would put little notes with it, I thought, gee, I think this could be like a book. And
Hmm.
I'm generally a pretty private person. Like, I don't, that thing you said you saw on Instagram, I don't do that stuff. but I,
Yeah.
but the impetus was for, if there are any other moms like me or parents like me or human beings like me, it doesn't have to be someone who lost a child, or it could be somebody who lost their spouse. But I thought, if this in any way could help like inspire somebody to also alchemize their grief into something beautiful and not stay in the suffering of it, then it doesn't matter if I'm uncomfortable,
Yeah.
to put it out there. And that's kind of how it happened.
Well, I thank you for, being vulnerable and being able to share, because as I keep saying, this is what it's, I think, all about, is just normalizing conversation around what's helped us and helped us alchemize and transmute and not stay stuck. So I think it's such a beautiful expression. And your artwork is tremendous. I'm just going to pop the book up here. Um, so I, so it was an organization of your artwork and kind of journal entries. I'm curious, how was the selection of art? What was that based on? How did you, with all of your mass canvases,
It
what
comes
was that
out
process?
just honestly kind of random. Like, I saw the ones that I did in the beginning, like in the beginning of the book, there's ones with words on it, and it was a communication. And then the ones that came after that were very geometric, kind of like Kandinsky, how his music is very, his art is very music oriented.
Mm,
And he has like symphonies on there, but he also has very geometric shapes. Some are just circles and squares and lines, but it all makes sense. It all kind of, and that was kind of what started happening after, and so I don't know, I was randomly pulling the ones that were from that phase, and then the ones that got softer. And I did talk about this artist that, when I was sharing my paintings on Instagram, but not in context where they were coming from in my journey, more just sharing them. And somebody had made a comment that they were reminding them of a artist named Agnes Pelton, who she died in 1961, the year I was born, but she was also born on my birthday. Oh, so interesting. And so I looked at her artwork and I could completely see why this person commented that.
Oh my God.
And I thought, wow, like, and the woman, the artist looked like my maternal grandmother. Like she had a similar face. And so I thought, wow, this I'm bringing her along now on my journey with me, because I felt like, you know, if you believe in the spirit world and that you have guides and that I just felt like she must have been by my side at some point during these transitions of my paintings, because they did look like similar.
Wow.
And she was born on my birthday. When I
that
saw
is so
I was like, okay, this is too crazy.
Too many quinky dinks. Well, that's amazing. Totally gives me the chills, because there's just something with those birth dates and numbers and the synchronicities. It's all so fabulous and wonderful and mysterious. But it's to me such a light just to the knowing, I guess, to have. So with any of your clients, do they do any art, or is the integration more traditional style, or are you working with any clients in a creative capacity?
Oh, no. I mean, I don't particularly do that in my office space.
Okay.
I did talk about this somewhere else as well. I do feel like there are people who think that they're not creative. And I 100% believe every single human being on this planet is creative. I mean, being a human being is creative.
Absolutely.
And so, to channel your energy into something creative is often thought of as, well, I'm not a painter, or I can't sing, or, they're thinking of the sort of traditional creative outlets that we talk about. But arranging a flower bouquet is creative. Making a cup of coffee beautiful is creative. Setting your table in a way that is really pleasing to you is creative. Walking through the park, looking at stuff is, every little thing that we do in our life is a creative experience if we see it that way.
Absolutely.
So anybody who needs to channel that energy, like say you finish a retreat and there's a lot of grief or a lot of sorrow, and you're not really sure exactly how to identify it, and it's almost like, how do I channel this feeling? And it could be, moving your body, because moving the body is a good way to release somatic experience. Sometimes it's a collage. Sometimes, like we just talked about before, it's sharing and communicating, and that is a creative experience. Like
storytelling. Yes, absolutely. I mean, anything to express versus repress, right?
Yeah.
So I think, and creating is one of the ultimate high vibes, right? Anytime we're putting our heart and soul or emotion into creating anything, like you said, whether it's scribbling
or even you set up your, I'm looking at your background and your chair, and that's beautifully creative. It's very pleasing to look at.
Oh, well, thank you.
It tells the viewer what you're doing,
Thank you.
Doing something kind of spiritually exotic here,
Yes. No, it's funny. Coincidentally, my background is in creative direction. So a lifetime ago that I was in the art department at Best Buy corporate. But people are so quick to say, well, I'm not creative. You're the creative. It's like, no, like, just as you're saying, cooking and making coffee. And so I love to hear that. And I think anybody having any doubts on their creativity, I challenge them.
Me too.
So have you ever explored creating artwork under the influence of medicine? I'm just curious.
I have microdosing has not really been for me, and it's like I want to emphasize that every single person is unique, and every single person has a particular constitution. And so I microdosed mushrooms for a while, and so I did create some paintings under that. But I found, weirdly, they made me tired microdosing. So because you're quite over. So when you ask if I've done any under the influence, I guess not. I mean, maybe some watercolor type things that I'll bring to a retreat, but the big ones I do are, I couldn't bring something like that with me. And, I'll never say never, because I certainly might do that. But I I kind of feel like I'm always under the influence in a weird way. Once you kind of have these really mind expanding experiences, for me, they have stayed with me. So.
Yeah, I was totally just curious. I have some friends that was their intention of their journey was to create art. And I think what was funny is the end result wasn't very visibly pleasing. But yeah, my girlfriend, this piece she created is ever evolving and changing in her mind, the story behind it or what into it. And I can relate. I have a little story, but I during the beginning stages of my divorce, I had separated and was in this new apartment, and I needed a piece of artwork. And I went to just a place that sold prints, and I was a very down girl, not necessarily about the divorce or separation, but just my mental health and heavily drinking and depressed. And I saw this Picasso, and in my mind, when I purchased this print, it's this woman, and she's leaning over her knees, and she looks as if she's weeping over her knees. Well, the long story short, I hung that on my bedroom wall and did a lot of journeying and self-exploration for a few years, sitting with her in my bedroom. And the story of her just did a complete 180. It was like, she is this strong woman and the sun is beaming off of her back. And I just think it's a little funny when I think back to myself, just how my perspective has opened and expanded and shifted. So it's from sad woman to literally my hero. I don't know where I'd be without her. I'm just fascinated with art. I always have been, but just the story, art, to me, the stories are ever evolving, or can be, and up for interpretation.
The stories that we tell ourselves, this happens in the last retreat that I was working at. The leader of the retreat does these psycho-spiritual journeys with the guests, and it's really interesting way to change a story that we've been telling ourselves subconsciously since the story was planted in there, maybe at 4 years old or 8 years old or whatever. Say something happened to you on the playground and you got very ashamed of yourself and you felt like, I'm not good enough. And that story gets planted. And then through our whole life, we subconsciously have this feeling like, this story we tell ourselves, like, I can't do that, I'm not good enough, and I'm not going to even try because I got made fun of, or whatever it is. And it's almost like going back to the origin of the story, and you can redo the story, and like, which one is more real? Just like, if it's a memory and it's in my body and I create a new memory, how the story went differently, which one is real?
Right.
So you're looking at that painting and she's sobbing, and now you're looking at it and she's so strong, and which one is real?
Which one is real? Yeah, choose your own adventure is what I say.
Yeah.
But that work can be hard because I think these stories are so ingrained, and even allowing yourself to the idea of switching it up and having belief in the alternate scenario or ending is easier said than done, because it's just
But that's where that neuroplasticity comes in place.
yes.
You know?
Okay. I love that.
Because there it's available. So like I was telling you before, when we get so used to a way of thinking, then those neurochemicals in the brain likes what it's familiar with, and it becomes a smooth track. But having a deep meditation practice or a psychedelic experience especially changes that track, and it opens it up, and it's like, oh, I'm ready for something new. You can mold me again. And that's such a perfect opportunity to like plant a new way of thinking, a new story. And you just have to keep leaning into that new story. And every time your brain starts to try to pull back to the familiar, where you say, no, but I can't really do that. It's like, boom, I got to go back to this new story I'm telling myself. And eventually the brain adjusts and says, well, she's not interested in that old way anymore. And I guess we're leaning in this direction. And then that direction just becomes easier and easier. And then it's like second nature, just like the old story was.
Yes. Well, and to be fair, you have years of experience talking and helping people. But I think it's so crucial. I'm so happy that we're talking specifically again about integration, because it can't be said enough. And just how quick we are to have these negative mental things enter all day long, thousands, hundreds of thousands of times. I mean, for some people, I don't know, but yeah, that was a regular for me. Just live it. So I'm every day learning and growing, and it's just wonderful to have conversation around it, just reinforcing that things can change and different paths can be created. So let's, just for our listeners here, if there's anybody that's kind of like sitting in fresh grief or like unprocessed pain, is there anything they can do? Maybe they don't have a psychedelic journey lined up, but just today, is there anything they can do to try and start some sort of integration?
I think one of the crucial things for me was honoring my son and knowing for sure that he really wanted me to be happy. Like I had such that strong connection that if I started to laugh about something, I heard him in my mind saying, yes, yes. Like, of course you have to feel grief, that's the human condition of loss. Mm-hmm. And I think it's really important to honor that pain. You can't skip that step at all. But so for anybody who's in new grief, it's like, just feel it. You have to feel it. You can't pretend it isn't there. But as you go through the days, a lot of people share with me that when they start smiling again and laughing, they feel guilty because they're like they're not honoring the loss. And I said, you're actually doing the opposite, because all that our loved ones want for us is to experience joy. And nobody wants to look down from the sixth dimension or wherever they are and see someone in so much pain. It's not an honor to them. And actually I did a course with was it Gabor-Mate or no, it was one of the MAPS courses, and it was the MDMA therapy. Mm-hmm. And so we watched one of the videos that they had of one of their patients that was a a war veteran, and he qualified for their program that they were trying to create to pass the MDMA through the FDA.
Mm-hmm.
Because he had severe PTSD, he was suicidal, and he was, really at the end of his ropes. So he goes through this program, does the MDMA therapy. We watch the video of him under the influence of the MDMA as the two therapists are working with him. And he had experienced his best friend just get blown up in front of his face. And he was holding him with his legs across the, Humvee or whatever. And the guy was dying in his arms. And so here it is years later, and he just felt like, how could I possibly have any happiness in my life when he didn't even get to live? That was his story. And during this experience, he sat up and took off the eye mask, and he was with his friend in this experience. And his friend was telling him, he's like, I'm good. You're not. And this isn't, you're not honoring me at all by like staying miserable and being suicidal. And he said, the best thing you can do to honor me is live a good life, live life.
Yes.
He was sharing this, he's sobbing, and it just so dramatically changed the trajectory of the rest of his life, because then they follow up like a year later and he has no PTSD. When you live your life kind of, even if it's just to honor somebody, you have a purpose,
Yeah.
So that's a long explanation to say. I think, once you get past the physical, the grief is so physical. It is so physical. Then I think, go ahead.
Oh no, I'm just saying I agree. And I think that, learning that people, again, can have these experiences that they've only dreamt of or never even thought would be possible. And then learning to embody this out of this world experience. So it's so good to hear that people are doing this, with all sorts. That was MDMA, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I have yet to sit with ayahuasca, and I do want to ask have you had any full on, I know you're connected spiritually with Sean, but do you have journeys where you've had even more profound, or any stories you can tell?
Yeah, that was in a Bufo experience.
Wow.
Completely like with him in his world, in like heaven, call it whatever you want, but it was super profound.
Wow.
Yeah, that's not one to take lightly. That's one of the more powerful psychedelics, short lasting, but that was, and I did it I have to be careful with like my license because I did it in a legal place. I was down in Mexico. So yeah.
Yes, I agree. And I think all of them, we have to be so responsible, all of the medicines working with them. But yeah, Bufo, I like to look at that. I always say there's the pyramid and ayahuasca and Bufo. You can have some out of this world. I've had Bufo. And I'm just going to label it my 20-year scream.
Oh,
Enough said. Well, this has been so wonderful. I appreciate you just sharing your story and professionally how you are continuing to help so many. And again, by bringing your own experience and everything that comes with living. And I just believe that it is such an integral piece of all of this. And it's so fabulous to, know somebody that offers these services. I just wanted to bring it back to your book one more time. I'm going to hold it up. The Alchemy of Grief, always going the wrong way. Can you tell us how our listeners can find more about you? I know you have an Instagram page and possibly the book and when it might be ready.
Oh, it's actually out.
Oh, good.
That looks like I think you got a one that was before it was out, but it's out. It's on Amazon. So The Alchemy of Grief, Conversations in Paint. My therapy is anandatherapyfl.com. And my art is just deborahkadagian.com. But yeah, and I've written some articles that are on my therapy website that are, it's an old one through Psychedelics Today that was published of my integration work, and from a personal perspective to if people are thinking of going into this field. Like when I was younger and there was no internet and no way to research what it was like to actually work in a particular field. And when I was trying to, seeking what I wanted to do, I was in my early 20s. I thought, I wish people would just write a book on what it is like on a day-to-day basis to be, I don't know, an advertising executive. Like, what is it like? Or to be whatever the field was. And so that article that I wrote was, if somebody was thinking of being an integrative psychotherapist, this was sort of my personal experience. So you can kind of get like a perspective on.
I see. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. And yeah, for all the listeners, we'll have links in the episode description. I do have one more question for you. Are you keeping up with some of these medicines and how they're helping with opioid addiction?
Well, I'm glad you asked me that because to me, of all the psychedelics, I think the most important one for humanity, I know this is sort of a grand statement, but is Iboga.
Okay.
That done safely, which is so important to have someone who knows what they're doing. Ibogaine is different. So Ibogaine is what you were kind of starting to refer to, which is just an absolutely incredible medicine for addiction. Like it's just beyond anything that is offered in the United States as a healing medicine for addiction.
So Ibogaine would be like the synthetic version of Iboga?
Well, the alkaloids have been pulled out, and so you're not getting the full effect of the root bark is what it is. And it has to be done in a medical facility. And that's just, I can't say enough of how incredible of a healer Ibogaine is for addiction. Iboga can have that same effect, but it's also, it's a way to meet yourself and almost like have this, and everyone's experience is different as well, but there's kind of this overarching theme of whatever you need to see about yourself, it's going to show you, but it's going to show you in a very rooted way, because it is like a root and it roots you, and it's not a psychedelic like where you're going to see different, space, like
visuals and
take you somewhere. And this is very much, it becomes you, and it's an amazing healer and medicine. So, yeah.
Have you been lucky enough to sit with it?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
And work with people on that retreat and just see the effects and see, see how, it's pretty powerful.
I've been reading, especially with addiction, opioid addiction, Ibogaine and
alcohol too as well.
What was that? Sorry, what was that?
Alcohol addiction.
Alcohol, yeah.
Alcohol addiction as well.
Yeah, I think I would love, it's newer to me, but yeah, I think that I was reading with addiction, like it has the ability, Ibogaine, to kind of like reset your brain to a period of time before the addiction or cycles started. So interesting. But yeah, all of these medicines are so, so, so powerful. And again, I'm very happy just to have the conversation and introduce. I don't think we've talked about Iboga yet on this podcast.
Texas, I think just yesterday or the day before, passed something that is going to start allowing the testing of it. I think. I mean,
okay. I saw that they were up, or there was something legislation wise there.
Yeah.
And I think in Colorado, I think it's on the list of the legal medicines, but they have yet to have any. I shouldn't be talking if I don't know for sure, but I believe Ibogaine is on their list of legal medicine, but again, it has to be done in a medical setting. So I'm sure that just takes time, but yeah, I'm very, very interested in learning about all the plant medicines. And we'll probably be in touch with you. I want to hear more. No, this has been so fabulous. I love hearing about all this wonderful work you're doing, and just what a wonderful way to honor your son. And just to know that you have certainty that you're always connected, and sharing that for others is so helpful. And it's okay to express our grief and in so many different ways. So thank you so much for your time today, Debbie. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Alrighty. Well, thanks guys for tuning in. Be sure to check out the episode description for links to learn more on Debbie, and we'll be back. Thank you so much, everyone. For more information, please visit mindsonmushrooms.com. Thank you for joining the journey.